Hello my friends and welcome back to another video. Today is going to be an unhaul. So I am moving and I need to make some room because I have a lot of books and as you can see they don't all fit on my bookshelves. I've talked about this before, but I have book piles pretty much everywhere in this room because I don't have enough bookshelves, and now that we are moving I will be able to get more bookshelves and have more space. But because we are moving, I have to take all my books to the new place, and I don't want to move every single book. I want to make sure that I'm moving books that I actually want to take with me and that I care about and that I actually enjoy and want to keep. But I started this unhaul pile at the beginning of 2023 and I've been slowly adding books to it since, so I would have a big unhaul for the start of 2024. And luckily we're moving this month, so it's kind of perfect timing to do this unhaul so I can have more room and not have to carry and pack a bunch of books with us. Now before I get any questions, because I know people question this a lot, if you want to know what I do with these books that I'm unhauling, the first thing is I give my mom and Justin first dibs, so they get to look through all the books they want, read whatever they want. It's always that they get first dibs just because my partner loves reading. He's a very avid reader and so is my mom. My mom loves reading and she reads a lot of the similar things that I do. She likes thrillers, she likes horror. So I always let her go wild because I know that she enjoys some things that I don't. So I think some of these books could work for her way better than they do for me. And then Justin likes sci-fi, he likes different kinds of things, he likes fantasy, and he likes horror. So I feel like he can choose any of these as well. And then after they get to decide what they want, I do donate books. So I'm not just throwing them in the trash. I'm not just like doing crazy things with them. I promise they are not being abused. They are going to new people who will love them and read them and enjoy them much more than I did or will. Without further ado, I'm gonna try to make this quick. I'm not going to summarize these books. Most of them I've talked about before. I'm just going to tell you pretty much why I'm getting rid of it, and that's about it. So let's get into it. First up is The Drowning Kind by Jennifer McMahon. I read this just a few months ago. I didn't really love it. I felt like there were a lot of ideas in this one that just didn't really mesh well, and I don't know, I wasn't a fan of the overall story. I do think my mom might be though. So I will put this to the side so she can check it out and see if she will like it, because I think she might enjoy this one. Hex, I feel like you all know I DNF'd this. It was in my worst books of 2023 and my DNFs because I just absolutely did not like this book at all. But I also think my mom might like this because, I don't know, she tends to like things that I don't. I don't know, maybe she'll get on with the writing a little bit better than I did, so I might set this aside for her and see if she wants it. The Twyford Code by Janice Hallett. Unfortunately, I did DNF this book. I just wasn't interested in the secret code mystery, and I felt like the way that this book was written, the voice recordings, I just wasn't a big fan of. I prefer the appeal by far, so I didn't even read the whole thing. So definitely want to give this to someone who will actually enjoy this story. Familiar Spirit by Elisa Tuttle. I thought this was just okay, very average, very predictable, very 70s, 80s B horror movie. I prefer A Nest of Nightmares by Lisa Tuttle to this, so I personally didn't think it was worth keeping because it wasn't a standout story. Indigo Ridge. This is a mystery romance. Didn't like the main character, that she was a cop. Didn't love the love interest. I thought he was kind of a dick. Didn't love the mystery aspect. I will not continue this series. I don't think it was for me at all. We Spread by Ian Reid. This one's a hard one for me. I didn't love it like everyone else did. I think I gave it 3.5 stars. I just didn't really connect with the story like everyone else did. I love Ian Reid's writing, but I just felt like the story didn't really do much for me. I've been holding on to it. I didn't know if I wanted to unhaul it or keep it, but I just, like, there was no point for me to have this if I didn't really like the story that much, so yeah, I'm gonna pass this along. Hidden Pictures by Jason Rekulak. This this 4 stars. At the time I liked it, but the more I think about this story, the more I really didn't enjoy it. I didn't like the ending. I really didn't like the ending. That's why I took off a star for it when I rated it 4 stars. But I just don't even really like think about this book. Like when I look at it, I'm like, oh yeah, that one. It was fine. Like it was good, and that's not really a 4 star to me. I want to at least look at a 4 star and be like, yes, that one was so good. So I feel like I didn't really like this one as much as I thought I did. So if I don't really feel those kinds of feelings for it, I don't know why I would keep it. So I'm just going to unhaul it. Then we have Lone Women by Victor Laval. I'm really sad that I don't love this book. I think I gave it 3.5. I liked the first half a lot, and the second half I didn't really like. I just felt like it got a little disconnected for me, and I didn't enjoy the story as much. So I'm really sad because I do want to keep this, and this is the first book I've read from this author, but I don't know if I should keep something in my collection that I didn't actually enjoy all the way. So I think I am going to probably pass this one. Then there's Once There Were Wolves by Charlotte McConaughey. I DNF'd this 2 years ago, and it's been sitting on my shelves, and honestly, I don't think I'm ever going to pick this up again. But I am going to give this to Justin because he likes wolves, and I do feel like this is a story that he might enjoy. I don't know if he'll like the whole story, but I feel like he might find it interesting, and it's fairly short, so I feel like it's something that he could, you know, just pick up and give it a try. So I'm just gonna give that to him. Then we have 2 Colleen Hoovers, and that is It Ends With Us and Ugly Love. So I bought these after I read Verity, and Verity was really good. I really enjoyed it, but Verity was more of a thriller. I didn't realize that Colleen Hoover was primarily a romance writer, and I've just heard not great things about Colleen Hoover as an author. Personally, I try to not support authors that are controversial or, you know, doing things that I don't personally like or agree with. I've heard what these books are about. I don't think that's the kind of romance I would enjoy. I don't think they are personally something that interests me. So I don't think I want these on my TBR. I don't want to keep them. I just don't think I will enjoy them. I don't think I'll get anything from these. So I'm going to pass these along to people who will get more out of these than I will. My Darling Girl by Jennifer McMahon. Another Jennifer McMahon that I am unhauling. This is my least favorite from her so far. I gave it 2.5 stars. It's just things that I didn't really like in a book. I didn't really find this one to be anything special, and the tropes used I wasn't a big fan of the way they were used. So I don't know, I think my mom might like this, honestly, so I'm gonna give this to her and see if she enjoys it. The Pallbearers Club by Paul Tremblay. Yeah, worst book of 2023, or one of them at least. I really hated this. I found it pretentious and confusing and not at all a horror or a thriller. I didn't really get what this was trying to do. So yeah, don't want to keep this, didn't enjoy it, want it out of my collection. One Day in December by Josie Silver. Another romance that I just don't think is for me. Something that I didn't enjoy. A lot of tropes and, you know, things in this that I just don't really like in romance at all. I'm not really a fan of right person, wrong time in fiction. In real life, I do enjoy it, like when people actually experience it, but for like movies and books and TV, I'm not a big fan of it. So yeah, I didn't really enjoy this one, so I'm just gonna get rid of it. Then we have Halloween Party by Agatha Christie. I attempted to read this, but I was kind of just like bored to tears, honestly. I feel like my mom might like this. She enjoys Agatha Christie, I think. So I might just pass this on to her and see if she would like it. Then we have Shadow Vista by Charles Coyote and Mark Steensland. I think I just butchered that. I'm so sorry. This is extremely short. It's a very short novella. I read the first chapter of this. It's a slasher, but it's kind of like meta, and honestly, as much as I love slashers, I don't think I will like this, so I am just gonna get rid of it. Then we have The Violence by Delilah S. Dawson. I'm not a fan of pandemic, apocalypse types of stories. This one was too big for my liking. I thought that the multiple POVs were just too much. I wasn't very interested in this one, and I just think someone else will like this much more than I did. Then we have Out of the Fire by Andrea Contos. This is a YA like thriller or something about a stalker. Had this on my TBR for like 2 years. I read the first chapter of it and it just didn't really grab my attention, so I decided to unhaul it because I shouldn't be having books on my TBR for that long. Then Graveyard of Lost Children by Katrina Monroe. I'm just not a big fan of horror books that deal with motherhood. I'm child free. I don't want children. I don't want to be a mom. So I think books that focus on that in horror just don't really do much for me. I wanted this to be more horror, and at first I was really excited, but then it kind of went into the postpartum depression kind of area, which I do think is an important topic, but it's just not something that I can fully connect to in a story. I'm gonna pass this on to my mom because I think she might like it. Next is Woman of the Year by Darcy Bell. I DNF'd this because the main character was insufferable and it felt like she was going on tangents that had nothing to do with anything. It was just very boring. I wasn't excited. It's really short too, which is kind of sad that I DNF'd it so early, but yeah, I don't think I will ever pick this up again. Then we have The Angel Maker by Alex North, another thriller that I just felt like missed the mark. There was a lot trying to happen. I felt like the story kind of got confusing, and then it kind of became super predictable, and I just wasn't that interested in it, and I wasn't that impressed with the overall story, so yeah, I don't really want to keep average, mediocre thrillers in my collection. Dark Across the Bay by Anya Alborn. She is one of my favorite horror authors of all time. I have almost every single one of her books, so it's kind of crazy that I am unhauling this one, but this is probably my least favorite by her by far. I found it to be so boring and so predictable, and it just felt like nothing special, and honestly, I was just like wishing for it to end when I was reading it, so I just do not want to keep it, even though I do collect her work. I just don't want it in my collection, honestly. 12 Nights at Rotterhouse by J.W. Ocker. I found this to be really overhyped. Everyone talks about this one a lot, and I was not impressed. Again, thought it was super predictable and just kind of boring, and just there was nothing happening. I didn't really understand why everyone loves this one, so I just don't want to keep this one. Circling Back to You by Julie Tu. I did not enjoy this romance at all. It was really boring, and I didn't really care about the characters, and I'm not a fan of like fade to black scenes in romance when they don't want to be smutty or spicy. I just think they're really lame. They're just not really my thing. So I wasn't really a fan of this one. It was just not really the kind of romance I enjoy, so I just don't want to keep it. The Doll Master and Other Tales of Terror by Joyce Carol Oates. Do not enjoy Joyce Carol Oates' writing. I find it to be really dry and really boring. These stories were very lackluster. I was bored to tears while reading them, and I did not find them scary or horrific or spooky. I was just kind of like, oh my god, please end. So I definitely found out I'm not a fan of Joyce Carol Oates this year. The Saturday Night Ghost Club by Craig Davidson. I was super disappointed that I didn't love this one, but coming of age is just something that's either very hit or miss for me, and this one was kind of a miss. It just wasn't really that interesting, and I knew this was like more of a cozy horror, but honestly I didn't really find it horror at all, so I don't know. I just wasn't that invested in the story, and I found the ending to be extremely predictable. Then we have The Last One by Will Dean, one of my most anticipated thrillers of 2023, and boy was I disappointed because I found the actual idea of this whole story to be really cool initially, and then once everything got revealed in the book, I was like, that's it? That's it? That's the whole story? Okay, so I wasn't really impressed with it, honestly. I gave it like 3 stars, I think, so I don't know. Just a very mediocre thriller in my opinion. Another mediocre thriller, Thicker Than Water by Megan Collins. I believe I've read another book by this author, and I also found it to be like a very middle of the road, very average. So yeah, I barely remember it. Honestly, it didn't stand out at all. So Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman. I really love this edition. It's a very pretty, it has beautiful illustrations, but this is definitely too fantasy heavy for me, even though I know some people are like, that's not even that heavy of fantasy. I don't read fantasy. I don't really like fantasy, so this was a lot for me. It was too much. I just didn't really get it. I don't know. Wasn't really for me. Then we have A Crooked Tree by Una Mannion. This is more of like a contemporary fiction kind of story. I wanted it to have more like mystery to it. I knew it wasn't like a thriller, but I wanted like more intensity. It had a lot to do with like growing up and family relationships, and I couldn't see myself in the characters, so it was hard to have a connection to this story. So I just wasn't that invested in anything. So I just didn't really feel much about this one. The Lak House by Sarah Beth Durst. I really wanted to like this one because the cover is so freaking cool, but I just didn't love the story that this was, like the direction it took. Even for a YA like horror, I just didn't really love it. I did like the 3 main characters and their friendship. I thought they were really enjoyable, but honestly they were my favorite part, and I feel like that's not a good enough reason to keep a whole book. So I am gonna unhaul it. The Swell by Ali Reynolds. She writes Shiver, which is one of my favorite thrillers of all time, but unfortunately I just wasn't a big fan of this. I didn't really find it thrilling. It just kind of felt like a different take on Lord of the Flies, and I just wasn't that interested in the story. I just didn't think it was anything special. Guessed the twists, so yeah, it wasn't anything that I would consider stand out or want to keep on my shelves. Then we have Mark of the Wicked by Georgia Bowers. This is a YA like fantasy book about witches. I was so bored reading this. I just didn't care. I thought the idea was cool, but honestly, I thought the story was really predictable and typical, and again, just nothing special, and I was really happy when it was over. So Ghost Eaters by Clay McLeod Chapman. I was really sad that I didn't like this, but I really didn't enjoy this book. I thought it was going to be something way different than it was, and I was really disappointed because I thought we were getting a ghost story, and it's not really a ghost story. It's more about like drugs, honestly, and like drug addiction, and I just wasn't that invested. There is a character named Aaron though, which I was excited about, but yeah, was not a fan. Did not enjoy this one pretty much at all. Then we have Cursed Bunny by Bora Chung. This is a short story collection, and honestly the stories leaned much more like sci-fi magical realism than what I typically like. I just think it was a personal preference thing. They just weren't my kind of stories, so I just didn't have a really good time while reading them. Next up we have She Is a Haunting by Trang Ton Tran, and this is a YA horror. I was really excited about this one, but I found the overall story really confusing and the writing just really hard to follow. I never knew what was going on, and I just didn't like know what I was reading, and even at the end I was kind of like, what happened? I don't know. So yeah, I gave it 3 stars, but I just didn't love this one. Next up is Cotton Candy Massacre by Christopher Robertson. Yeah, did not like this one. I found the characters to be really annoying. I thought the idea was really cool and very unique and very different, but it was very long for a slasher, and I like my slashers very fast and quick and bloody and crazy, and I thought this one was okay in terms of like kills, but I expected more, honestly, for a book that's considered splatterpunk. So yeah, I just wasn't that thrilled by this, and I didn't really care for the writing overall. Jawbone by Monica Ojeda. I DNF'd this like 3 times. I can't read this book. It is so confusing and so hard to follow the way it's written, and I don't even know what it's about, honestly. I didn't really get it. It's just not a book for me. It's not the type of writing I enjoy. It was just really hard to follow, and I can't see myself reading it a 4th time or trying to read it a 4th time, so I'm just gonna unhaul it. Along the River of Flesh by Christopher Triana. This was the sequel to Gone to See the Riverman. Gone to See the Riverman is one of my favorite horror books of all time, but I did not like this sequel. I gave it 2.5 stars. I was super disappointed by it. I thought all the things that Gone to See the Riverman did right, this did wrong. I just wasn't a fan of this. I know a lot of people loved it, but I just couldn't get into it. I'm gonna give this to my mom because she loved Gone to See the Riverman too, so I want to see if she enjoys the sequel more than I did. Then we have What Kind of Mother by Clay McLeod Chapman. I loved the first half of this story, the thriller, mystery, disappearance part of the story, and then the second half got really weird and body horror, and I just didn't really get the story after that. It just wasn't something that I enjoyed, so it was just a little too bizarre for me, so unfortunately I am also unhauling this one. Wakenhurst by Michelle Paver. I read the first chapter of this and was bored to tears. It's more of like a gothic horror story, and that's just so hit or miss for me, so I decided that I was probably never going to read this, and I am unhauling it. Have You Seen Her by Catherine Mackenzie. This was another just very average, basic, typical, mediocre thriller. Felt like it didn't do anything new or innovative or different, and I kind of barely remember it, but I do remember it being extremely predictable, and yeah. If We're Being Honest by Kat Shook. This is another like contemporary fiction story that has to do with like family and family relationships and being in a family and like the family dynamic, and again, it's just something that I couldn't see myself or my own family reflected in, so it was hard for me to connect or care about any of the characters. Then we have Bloodline by Jess Lurie. This is like a mystery, Rosemary's Baby kind of vibe. I just found it predictable. I have really high expectations when I hear a book compared to Rosemary's Baby, and I just didn't feel like this like stood out next to others that I have read that compare themselves to Rosemary's Baby, so I just wasn't that interested in it. The Silent Companions by Laura Purcell, a gothic horror novel that just was kind of boring to me and not very scary or not very interesting, and I really didn't like the ending of this one, so I just feel like it's not the book for me. The Girl in 6E by A.R. Torre. I just found this to be a very predictable thriller. I found the main character kind of irritating, and I don't know, I just didn't really get the hype that everyone really had about this book. Everyone really loves it, and it just didn't really work for me. And this is the second book I've read by this author that I didn't really love, so it might be an author thing. I'm not really sure. Dark Water by Koji Suzuki. This is a short story collection. I just didn't really enjoy the short stories. I found them all to be kind of like meh, not very scary, more like just like mysterious, so I don't know. I'm not really a fan of Koji Suzuki's writing, and I didn't really think these were anything that compared to some other horror stories I've read. I have some questions for you by Rebecca Mackay. This was also in my DNF worst books of 2023. I made it like 80 pages, something like that, into this book. I did not like the writing. It was super jostling and felt like I was getting whipped back and forth, and I felt like it kept jumping from past to present to past to present to past to present, and I couldn't even keep track, and yeah, I barely even remember what this book was about, but it definitely was not for me. Mr. Wrong Number by Lynn Painter, another romance that I just felt was very average and didn't really do much for me. I didn't think it was that fun or interesting. I don't know. It just doesn't really compare to the romances that I absolutely love. So I just don't think I want to keep it. Reprieve by James Hahn Matson. Another book that I just think didn't really work for me personally. It's definitely more of like a literary horror story, and it just wasn't what I wanted it to be. It wasn't bad, but it just didn't really do anything that made me excited or interested. I just kind of was reading to get it over with. The Fervor by Alma Katsu. I really wanted to love this one because it has folklore about Japanese spider demons, but honestly, it's a lot more historical fiction than it is horror, and I'm not a big fan of historical fiction. It's just not something that I'm interested in, and it just doesn't really work for me, so I just didn't love this one. I wanted it to be more horror, and it just wasn't. There's No Way I Die First by Lisa Springer, a YA horror slasher. Nothing's really terrible about this book, but if you're gonna do a slasher, I feel like it kind of has to stand out. There's so many slashers nowadays, and this YA just didn't do anything different. It just felt very predictable, and it just wasn't, I don't know, it just didn't make me excited. So again, just wasn't that thrilled by it. The Third Parent by Elias Withrow, one of my least favorite books of 2023. I thought it was not very well written, and I just felt like it was a little too silly goofy in terms of horror. It wasn't really scary, it wasn't really disturbing like it was supposed to be, and I thought the overall idea was just kind of not really my kind of thing. Another one of my worst books of 2023, Ring by Koji Suzuki. I hated this. It is not worth reading, honestly, in my opinion. I would suggest watching the movies, any of the movies, besides reading this. I just think reading it is a waste of time, and it's not as good. The movies do a way better job of making it scary and not as misogynistic, so not worth it. Another one of my worst books of 2023, Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant. I know this is a fan favorite. I don't like sci-fi. I found this boring. Too long. It didn't interest me. The scenes that were exciting and scary were so far and few in between. The ending was super lackluster, and I just wasn't a big fan of the story as a whole. Justin really loves this story. He read it with me for my Patreon book club, and he really enjoyed it, so I think I'm gonna give it to him so he can have a physical copy of it. And then we have The Auctioneer by Joan Sampson. This was so boring and unrealistic and not fun at all. I was falling asleep while reading it, and yeah, I just didn't like it, so I don't want to keep it. Then we have Knock Knock by S.P. Miskowski. This was a book that I also just read the first chapter of and didn't find interesting. It had been on my TBR for like 3 or 4 years at that point, something like that, maybe 2 years, I don't know, but I don't think I'm ever gonna read it, so I'm just gonna unhaul it. The Godsend by Bernard Taylor. Another book that I've had on my TBR for way too long and keep forgetting about, and I read the first chapter. I thought it was alright, but honestly, I just never gravitate towards it, so I don't think I will. I'm just gonna unhaul it. Same with these three, actually. Wisteria Cottage by Robert M. Coates, Dementia by Russell Coy, and Jedi Summer with the Magnetic Kid by John Bowden. All three of these I've had on my shelves for way too long, and honestly, I just don't think that they interest me. I don't think I'm gonna gravitate towards them, and if I haven't read them by now, I'm not gonna read them anytime soon. This is the graphic novel Witches. I read this in April, I think, and honestly, I wasn't a fan of the artwork. I wasn't really a fan of the story. I thought the story was kind of confusing the whole time, and it's just not something that I enjoy, so I'm just gonna get rid of it. Then we have Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. I did enjoy this romance. I'm kind of on the fence of keeping it because it's not that I didn't like it, it was just a little too long for me. I felt like it took forever to get to the point. I felt like the smut was really good in this one though. Like, I really enjoyed the smut. I just felt like the story itself, I was kind of like, okay, you know, whatever. So I am on the fence with this one. I might keep it, but I'm not really sure if I will. The Stranger Upstairs by Lisa M. Matlin. This should have been in my worst books of 2023. I think I just forgot about it. This was so bad. The main character is so annoying and the story itself is not worth it. Like, the ending is just ridiculous, honestly. It felt so pointless once I finished it. I was like, why did I finish this? Why did I read this? Like, why? What was the point? So, yeah, hated this. The Golden Spoon by Jessa Maxwell. This is like a cozy mystery. I thought this was fine. Didn't really excite me. I thought the idea of it, because it has to do with baking, was really fun, but I thought the mystery wasn't as good as it could have been. So, I don't know. It was like a 3.5, but nothing like super amazing in terms of cozy mysteries. Runtime by Catherine Ryan Howard. This pains me because I love Catherine Ryan Howard, but this was not a thriller that I enjoyed. Oh my god, it was so predictable and I just felt like it didn't really do anything cool or fun, and I was just kind of like, oh my god. Another thriller that is just so disappointing. So it pains me to say that because I love Catherine Ryan Howard, but this just did not work for me. The Halloween Moon by Joseph Fink. This was a middle grade horror. It didn't really feel like a horror. It wasn't that spooky or like scary, and I know that sounds kind of crazy, but there are some middle grade horror that is like actually scary, like Small Spaces. I love that one, but this was like meh. Okay, cool. So I didn't really love it. Another book that made it onto my worst of 2023, Theme Music by T. Marie Vandelli. This is basically just the Amityville horror, and I hated the main character the whole time. I found it predictable. The main character was so annoying, and it basically was just trying to copy the Amityville horror, which I absolutely hate when books try to recreate the Amityville horror or the Haunting of Hill House. I know that there are two very well-known haunted house stories, and they're like iconic and whatever, but I want people to do their own thing, and I want them to be unique, and I'm just tired of them copying the same two stories over and over again. Lastly is Not All Monsters, an anthology by women in horror. I read a few stories in here and I just wasn't that impressed. It had been sitting on my shelves for a really long time and I just don't think I was going to pick it up ever again. So I am just going to give it to somebody who will actually read it. And that, my friends, is the end of my unhaul. That was a lot of books. That was a lot. I know, I'm so sorry. I was trying to get this done as quick as possible, but I had a lot. I'm trying to be better about keeping books that I don't actually like and don't think are worth keeping. So if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. That way I know you enjoy unhauls and I can keep doing them for you in the future, because I'm sure I will have more books to unhaul eventually. And with that being said, I hope you are having a great day, night, morning, afternoon, wherever you are, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!